Hello, friends. Nayaswami Hriman here. We're in Linwood at the Ananda community, still surrounded largely by snow, which we hope and expect will melt here in the next few days. And we today, on our Rubaiyat adventure into the Far East, into Persia, and into timelessness, are on quatrain number 17. So once again, I'm going to read the quatrain and then have Swami Kriyananda sing it for us. And I think today I'll also have him read Yogananda's paraphrase before we enter into some commentary. Okay, so here's what it reads. They say the lion and the lizard keep the courts where Jamshid gloried and drank deep, and Bahram, the great hunter, the wild ass stamps o'er his head, and he lies fast asleep.
They say the lion and the lizard keep the courts where Jamshid gloried and drank deep, and Bahram, that great hunter, the wild ass, stamps o'er his head, and he lies fast asleep. Paraphrase. In the ancient city, now a deserted ruin, where once King Jamshid gloried in the splendor of his court, and drank his fill of material pleasures, there now roam only animals. And over the grave of that once mighty hunter, Bahram, the wild ass stamps its feet. Such are life's contrasts. As wakefulness alternates with sleep, so do pomp and triumph alternate with torpor and defeat. The scenes are woven by the threads of karma, as time's shuttle moves in and out with vast indifference. Even those who boast supreme earthly power must at last relinquish their dominion, leaving it perhaps to lesser men, or even surrendering it to wild beasts. Great cities like that of Jamshid, on whose broad walls mighty chariots once rode, fall before time's invasion and crumble to dust and desolation.
Well, that's a sober picture of human life through the lens of long, long history. Again, as in some previous quatrains, Omar isn't being cynical, he's being realistic. I remember Swami Kriyananda, whose voice you just heard and who edited Yogananda's commentaries on the Rubaiyat, saying, I think he said it probably a number of times, he said, think of yourself every time you shower or bathe and you're washing your arm. Just think that arm that you so lovingly wash, or the hair that you fix up so nicely, will soon turn to dust. The vanity of humanity is legendary and all but universal. And its opposite is just as vain. Yogananda once met in Phoenix, Arizona, a disheveled man who, when asked about his unkempt appearance, said, I'm a renunciate. Yogananda looked at him somewhat sternly, I imagine, and said, you're not a renunciate, you're attached to filth and being dirty. Ananda Ma, the great woman saint in India, whose life was somewhat contemporaneous with that of Yogananda, advised her entourage, her disciples, those who were with her all the time and so on, to not wear torn and dirty clothes. He said, we're not beggars. We can afford a clean, whatever it is, sari or t-shirt even. I remember Swami Kriyananda trying to clean up some of the boys, even some of the quote girls, they were women, but mostly the boys at Ananda Village in the early years who, we were mostly sort of quasi-hippie, at least in our appearance and so forth, and maybe to some extent proud of our rejection of modern society and the importance of appearances. But that kind of it's still pride and it's still attachment to the outer superficial appearance. And so Swami Kriyananda would sometimes gently or otherwise try to encourage them boys, the young men, to wear a clean shirt and maybe even come to Sunday service with something other than shorts. However, he admitted that as a young monk and in Los Angeles, and this would be in late 40s, early 50s, around there. Do you remember that popular actor, Jimmy Dean or somebody who, it was popular in those days to wear a white t-shirt, undershirt, that's all they didn't really have t-shirts back then, just undershirts. And you take a pack of cigarettes and roll it up and look like a tough guy. Well, Swami Kriyananda wasn't exactly a tough guy, but that was the habit then. And to show their disdain for material values, some of the monks would dress that way. One time, Rajarsi Janakananda, after Yogananda's passing, which was in 1952, Rajarsi became the successor to Yogananda, and one time commented to Kriyananda on his wearing of a torn t-shirt. However, it still goes without saying, however I'm going to say it, so it's still true that much of the world spends a lot of billions of dollars on cosmetics and hair things and so forth. I'm not going to put that down particularly if that's your thing, but I will say that when I came to Ananda Village, which would have been in 1977, after its famous forest fire, I was really, I appreciated the fact that the men and women, boys and girls, whatever, they seem like boys and girls to me now, we were all friends. And I can't say I ever observed any flirtatiousness or, there's always some of that, I guess, but when you're in your 20s. But, we were friends. And women dressed naturally and modestly without undue attention to their appearance. And the guys were, calm and respectful and not boastful or macho. Respect was the order of the day. And the opportunity and the gift to be just yourself and not have to put on makeup and all that stuff or whatever, not to act out a role. I was really appreciative of having just got there, like so many in those years, people coming from all over, mostly the country. In those days, foreign travel was, at least travel to the United States, was not quite what it became in later years. So it's at that time, in those years, some of us thought this was how the world was going to be. We were going to be natural and respectful and not so focused on our status or on our roles. Sadly, in terms of popular culture in the world, but certainly I'm speaking of America, did not exactly go that direction. But it will. Even at Ananda Village, first I've been speaking of appearances, but also in respect to roles. One of the beauties and one of the things I also appreciated in those years, which would have been late 70s into the 80s and into much of the 90s, at least at Ananda Village, the original and largest Ananda community worldwide, there was very little emphasis given, in fact almost none, to the roles and the titles that we had. During Swami's lifetime, when he was more actively involved with the activities of Ananda, not just his own, writing and lecturing and music and things that he was doing and the people he was counseling and guiding individually, but when it came to the community at large, different departments, a retreat, a publishing, and so on, he kept us all on our toes, because it was not uncommon to, after a period of time, sometimes not very long, even less than a year, but we were all sort of changing positions, I'm thinking of people managing departments. We had a health food store and cafe nearby Nevada City. We had a gift store and clothing store. It was so ironic, speaking of this subject that we're on here today, that I'm on, that we would have at our clothing store a fashion show. Well, it was sort of amusing because the ladies at Ananda were just not into that kind of thing. And yet, for the sake of service, for the sake of God and Guru, they'd get dressed up and put on makeup, I suppose. I might have attended one such show. But in any case, and they could be quite attractive. But it was amusing because whereas that's considered, enviable, I guess, or desirable or normal by millions of women, to these ladies, they were devotees, and they walked the floor or whatever that's called, just like they were supposed to. But there was no pretense there. It was just so sweet, so natural, is what I'm trying to say. And so it was also with the roles and titles. During the 80s, Swami began with increasing frequency, asking people to be a minister and ordaining different ones of us as ministers. And so it didn't really change things very much. There were so many of us as ministers or managers of departments and so forth that, those things just were not important to people. Then in 1993, when Swamiji asked Padma and I to come to Seattle, we were both quite taken aback by how much people here out in the city, how much emphasis they would place on your role as Reverend McGilloway, or, we were just not accustomed to that. We were simply taught by example by Swamiji that he treated us, despite the difference in our ages, despite the difference in his spiritual stature and his realization and wisdom and incredible talents and energy, he simply treated us each as individuals, respectfully, as friends serving together. That was a wonderful experience and a great example, and I know all of us in similar positions throughout Ananda worldwide, I think we've done a pretty good job in keeping that bhav. I say that because people remark on it, that there's very little, and I would say there's no pretense that I'm aware of in our work among people who hold certain positions. And that's as it should be. We're souls first. And then, Swami taught us that leadership is just another role. Somebody has to do it. Some people are better at it, let's say, and then others have a natural talent or a dharma to do it. Fine. But you need everybody. Everybody on the team is an integral element. And so this quatrain is asking us to drop the pretense of outward roles and appearances. And I've actually, during this COVID time, I've spent probably more time than I'm willing to admit, that because I enjoy it. I enjoy the book, The Yugas, and so I've watched some short videos on the lost civilizations of this planet, which are increasingly being rediscovered. And there's a wonderful book, I see it right there, that Morley gave to me, The Silk Roads, History of Humanity from the viewpoint of the Silk Roads, the period, the geography and culture between, let's say, between China and India on the one end, and call it Europe, if you like, on the other end. Those countries that here, at least in my upbringing, got very little attention in our history books. Persia and the Asian steppes. Well, there were once great cities, wealthy cities with great art. And Genghis Khan, despite everything else, was an incredible organizer, and he was tolerant of all religions. I mean, things that we were never taught, but where are they now? You see? So in this century, China is coming up, as I like to put it, but America is declining, as a lot of people like to put it, and it's obviously true, but it doesn't have to be precipitous. We'll just have to see. But in any case, it's just the way it is. So let's remain centered in the soul self. Okay, don't worry about the lions and the lizards that roam the world around us. Pay no attention to them. Those presidents of America, there's one recently now gone, I hope, gone. They come and they go, okay? And so do we. Joy and jai to all of you, great souls.